Morning, everyone. I'm Stan. Can everyone hear me on this thing? Okay. Catherine asked me a while ago to come and speak to you all this morning at Creative Mornings Cape Town about, I assume, the books that I've been working on over the last years. And I mean, what do you say about books after you make them? You hope that people will read them and experience them and enjoy the journey or whatever you went through to make them. And I really didn't know how to introduce maybe the 3 or 4 or 5 of the books that I've worked on. And I was expressing this to a good friend of mine who's sitting in the back there, Nick. And he said, why don't you tell the story of the books through some of the characters that you met while working on the projects? Of course, I pretended this was a terrible idea, but I've decided to use it anyway. So I'll take you through some of the projects that I've worked on, and I'll tell you about some of the characters that I've met. The first book that I published, I don't know if you know this book, is called The Caution Horses. Very different from the work I've been doing later on. I went to Namibia in 1999. I had to get out of Cape Town. And I escaped into the desert, not knowing what I would find. And I happened upon a group of wild horses living in the desert close to a little town called Aus in southern Namibia, towards the coast. And I was planning to tour through Namibia, and I ended up staying in Aus 4 months. But essentially living with these horses, spending full days with them, and I started photographing them, not knowing why. And it was obviously very difficult because these were wild animals. And I shoot predominantly on short focal length lenses, like 50mm or equivalent of 50mm lenses. And it was very difficult for me to initially get close to them. And I met some of the locals there who knew stuff about horses that I didn't know. And they turned me on to some literature about horse communication skills. Now, this sounds pretty strange, but it's basically techniques that you can use to be able to get closer to horses or any pack animals. And, herd animals. And I started using these techniques, trying to get closer and closer to these animals. And before too long, I was able to get up really close and personal, which was really amazing. And the herd of horses at the time, it was close to 200 horses, were divided into little family groups. And what I would do is I would spend time with one family group and try and get as close as possible to them and spend as much time with them as possible to kind of record their behavior. And also my relationship with them. I mean, you'll notice in the photograph, I didn't show much of the landscape because I was mainly concerned with my relationship that was starting to develop with these creatures. And I didn't want to romanticize the photographs too much by including too much of this desert landscape. It was a really special time for me working on this project, and I ended up shooting a whole lot of material that was really beautiful, including this photograph, which is probably one of the most favorite photographs I've ever taken in my life. I was just sitting in the sand next to this mare. She was lying down, and she was so comfortable with me being there that she just fell asleep right there. Of course, because I was working with wild animals, I had to be considerate of the fact that I was, getting very close to these animals. They were getting too familiar with me. So as soon as I felt that was the case, I would always, stop spending time with that specific family group and move on to someone else. And I did this for 4 months. It was really incredible. I came back to Cape Town and I published this book. I was very fortunate to find a publisher who wanted to work with me. on that. And then a few years later, I mean, I spent some more time going back to Namibia, to the desert, photographing these horses. But I started working on a project called African Salad in 2003. I was commissioned by a company to work on a project for one of our big broadcasting. Come in. And I was required to broadcasting channels, one of the SABC channels, and I was required to travel around the country and photograph South Africans at home. You know, people like mowing their lawns and watering their gardens, that kind of thing. And everywhere I went, I was invited to have tea and rusks, and gotten introduced to the neighbors and invited for lunch and dinners. And it was a really fascinating experience, you know, hearing these pretty incredible stories of everyday South Africans. And we had the idea to maybe start recording some of these stories, photographing like family portraits and people's homes, that kind of thing. And we were wondering what was one thing that could, you know, keep everyone together if we wanted to do something with this project, like maybe turn it into a book. And we had the idea to maybe start collecting handwritten recipes, because that's how, you know, people would be connected to like a family member or a good friend. You have a recipe that you pass on. So we started collecting handwritten recipes, and that's how they appear in the final product, in the final book, along with the stories, obviously, and the photographs, family pictures, pictures of people's homes, that kind of thing. And while I was working on this project, it took about 2 years of working on it, on and off. I met this crazy guy called Mazayan Mofokeng, who lives in Sebokeng in just south of Joburg. I don't know if you recognize him. He's normally dressed up in like full regalia with makarapa and vuvuzelas. He's the #1 supporter of the Orlando Pirates soccer team. And that's why I was photographing him that day. And you know, I was spending time with him, and I was telling him about this project that I was working on, traveling around the country and collecting recipes and stories from people. And he asked me if I had a recipe for scorbo. And I didn't know what it was. I said no, and he said, well, I should really come back, and you know, he'll make scorbo for me. So I said, okay, fine, Zayn, no problem, I'll give you a call. And I did, actually. I called him a few weeks later, and he said, okay, come around. A month later, I was there with him, spending time in Sebokeng. He asked me to come in the morning, so we went to the market, got the vegetables, got spices, got a shitload of beer, and then he said, okay, now we need to go get the main ingredient. So we went down to the butcher's and selected one of the numerous severed sheep's head, like on a shelf there. It still had the hair and everything attached to it. It was quite a grim scene. And Mazayan just chose one, and we took it to the back, and he started like using scissors to cut the hair off, and then we had a blowtorch burning the hair off. We took this thing home, and he proceeded to shave it, which was quite strange. And he scrubbed the whole thing with a brush and with sunlight liquid. It was a whole like elaborate thing. It showed me how to clean the inside of the ears and the inside of the mouth and whatever. And he proceeded to steam this thing. And actually, once it was steamed, he popped out the eye and gave it to me. Apparently, it's a real like delicacy, and it's an honor to eat the eye. It wasn't so great. But anyway, while I was spending all this time with Mazayan in the kitchen, he was telling me about his life. I mean, he's totally devoted to soccer. He spent, since he was 17 years old, that's when he's got his supporters card of the Orlando Pirates, he's been a die-hard supporter. And the title, #1 supporter, is actually it's a serious title. I mean, he's lost his wife to soccer, to this fan club. He doesn't have a normal career because he's always busy spending all his extra time and money going to soccer games, organizing soccer-related events. But he's obsessed, and he's totally happy. I mean, look at that face. So anyway, we cooked up this dish, and actually this dish, that's the sheep's head after, that's how it's finally prepared. That was my plate. After it's steamed and everything, all the meat's cut off and the tongue's cut out and the brains are removed, and then it's all fried up together with some onions. And he created this dish. It's called Relax Magudini. which means relaxed boys. And it's a dish that he makes especially after big games, and then he invites some of the players and some of his friends that are also supporters, and this is the dish that they celebrate with. Everything in this guy's life is Orlando Pirates. I mean, you can see even the plates are like black and white. He was really an amazing character, and I still have contact with him. And African Salad was published in 2005, quite a while ago. A next project that I've worked on, this was published in 2009, it's called Miss Beautiful. Now, while some of you might have heard of African Salad, I don't think any of you have heard of Miss Beautiful. This was kind of the follow-up to African Salad, but sadly it wasn't as successful. It was a project that I started working on, trying to find out what South Africans might think is beautiful. And we stumbled upon the idea to visit beauty pageants. So I spent 2 years going from the smallest little, most obscure beauty pageant in some small town to the big one, you know, Miss South Africa. I attended all of these things, and it was quite a difficult project to work on. I mean, the pageant industry is a harsh industry, and you know, people have lots of dreams that they stake on winning one of these pageants, and it's not a one-way ticket to fame and fortune, and I think a lot of people have a really tough time with that. One of the incredible characters that I've met, Nelisiwe Mbata, who's 17, this photograph. I photographed her in Pietermaritzburg. This is before she was about to compete in the Mr. and Miss Gay Sabantu pageant at the Kismet Hotel in the background there. Now, the Kismet is in Pietermaritzburg. It's an old hotel that was bought by some benefactor, and it's become like a safe house for young lesbian women and gay men because of the society that they live in. It's Lisiwe she's Zulu. She's a young lesbian woman, and she lives in this area around Pietermaritzburg, specifically called Sebokeng. That's very traditionally and conservative Zulu community, and of course, very strong Christian morals are practiced there. So she has a really hard time being gay, and this pageant, the Mr. and Miss Gay Subantu, is like a safe place for them to express their sexuality and celebrate it. So basically how it works is the girls compete for Mr. Gay Subantu and the boys compete for Miss. So they obviously drag, and then the girls dress up as boys, basically. So this is Nelisiwe on the left there, and these are some of the other girls that competed in the competition that night. We decided to look at beauty in South Africa through beauty pageants because we figured that these are people that already consider themselves beautiful, and they consider themselves spokespeople of a subculture or of a generation. And therefore they enter these competitions because it's not only about what you look like, as many of you might know that have been to any of these things, but there's talents, and there's obviously often a kind of charity angle to it as well. So people that enter these competitions, they have something to say, you know, as the youth of South Africa. Many young people take part in these things. And of course, then there's a panel of judges who make it easier for us to find out who is the most beautiful person in the room, because they have the task of choosing that person. So we decided to attend these beauty pageants. This is Nelisiwe competing in the evening wear section of the pageant. And she went on to win. She won the title of Miss Gay Subantu, which she was very proud of. But sadly, she had to keep this title a secret because of her parents and her brothers and the boys in her community. She really feared for her life if anybody finds out that she's a lesbian. She lives totally in secret. I mean, she's part of a girls' soccer team. All the girls on the soccer team are lesbian, but none of their parents know that they're lesbian. None of the people in the community know that they're lesbian, which is really sad. So this is the kind of, you know, story that we had to deal with. It maybe looks like a lot of fun, but there's a very harsh like reality to the backstory. Now let's see where, like I said, she won that competition that night. And she said the most amazing thing to us afterwards. She said her ultimate dream is to make enough money one day that she could buy the cows for her lobola and give it to her parents, so she could essentially buy herself her freedom. She's the only girl among 7 brothers, so she's really expected to take her husband, and her parents obviously really expect to receive their lobola. Another project that some of you might have heard about is bicycle portraits. It's something I've been working on for the last almost 2.5 years now with Nick, with the good idea of telling the stories about people. Nick and I stumbled upon the idea of photographing South Africans who use bicycles as everyday means of transport. And we spent 2.5 years on and off cycling about 6,000 kilometers throughout the entire country and photographing whoever we come across on a bicycle. Find out their story, do a portrait of them. And while we were on one of our trips, we decided to go and look for this guy that we heard about called Tumisang Tabe. That's him and his lovely wife and children. He lives in Masiro in Lesotho. And Tumi is the blood and breath of anything to do with cycling in Masiro. Now, if you think that a few people ride bicycles, maybe in Cape Town and Joburg, in Masiro, it's like no one rides bicycles. There's like 10 people, and Tumi's involved with all of them. And he's involved with anything to do with cycling as well, to the point he's the president of his own Tumi's Bicycle Club. He's the vice president of the Lesotho Cycling Association. He owns the local bike shop, which is the bicycle clinic, Tumi's Bicycle Clinic. And nothing happens there in cycling that Tumi doesn't know about. Anyway, he was such an amazing character. We were just going to spend the afternoon with him, but he invited us to live with him and his family for a few days while we got to know him and heard his story. This is Tumi and his family. That's his mom next to him. Also an incredible woman. She's HIV positive, and she divorced her husband when the kids were quite young still, which is totally unheard of in their culture. And she raised Tumi and his sisters all by herself. And she, for years, she sold curios at the border post in Masiro. And that's where Tumi got his first bicycle as a gift, because he was always there working, helping his mom, selling curios at the border. And that's where he fell deeply in love with cycling. So the entire time we were there, Tumi was on his bicycle in full kit, with his helmet on, with that hydration pack on his back. When we were eating, all the time. I think he also slept in it. I'm not so sure. But anyway, we spent a lovely time with Tumi, and he showed us his bicycle clinic as well, which is really like a fascinating, chaotic place. These are some of the tools that they use to fix and build bicycles. As you can see, they're just very basic tools, and they don't really have any bicycle-specific tools, so they make do with what they've got. Here is Tumi in the workshop, which is utter chaos. So that's why they work outside on the bikes. There's no space inside. And he's sitting there with one of his trophies that he's won, and he's sitting on one of his golden creations. He's obsessed with gold and building bicycles. So this thing is a marriage of like a plastic and metal chair, and some bicycle parts that he's hacked together. This is another one of his bikes. This is made out of a leaf spring of a car. This long part here is the leaf spring of a car. And I actually had to ask him to take off his helmet for this portrait. But anyway, Tumi is such an amazing character, and he made such an impression on Nick and I that we ended up asking him to write one of the forewords for the bicycle portrait project books. We're about to publish these books in a few months, or weeks even now. It's getting really close. It's 3 volumes. We selected about 100, 150, 160 people that appear over these 3 volumes out of the about 500 people that we photographed. And Tumi is one of them, and he's written an incredible foreword for us. So it's really worth checking out. You can maybe look at our website or follow us on Facebook if you want to know when the book launch is going to be. It's going to be here in Cape Town very soon. A new project that I'm working on, or just started working on, is called African Remedy. I'm working on it with a good friend of mine, Jörg, who's not here this morning. We are taking a journey around South Africa via motorcycle to search for South Africa's elderly, 75 years and up, the older the better. And from them we get traditional remedies, boererate, old wives' tales, superstitions, and life advice, that kind of thing. And we recently took our first journey. This is just like a little tour diary that we had up on Facebook of some of the people that we've met and photographed, some of the things we've eaten, of course, and some of the landscapes we've traveled through. And this was just a short 2-week trip, and we photographed about 25 people, but it's proven to be a fascinating project so far, really interesting. About a week and a half into the trip, Jörg had a really bad crash in the Baines Kloof. There he is lying down on the road. He's not resting, he's hurt. And here he is in the Willowmore Hospital, the closest hospital, having his leg checked out. But brave man that he is, he decided that we should just continue and keep shooting. So the next day we were going to be in Knysna, and I thought maybe it was a good idea to try and find an old person who could maybe give him a remedy or some advice for his leg, to see what they would say. And we arrived in Knysna, and we were lucky enough to meet this guy, Farah Chinaka. He's 83 years old, and he's the local wise man and medicine man, or witch doctor. And we had a fascinating time with him. Here he's lying on his dream bed. He's got a special room where he does all his consultations, and in the room there's a bed. And he'll lie down on the bed, and he often sleeps there at night. And this is where he receives messages from ancestors, new recipes for concoctions that he makes up for, whatever ailment you might have. And he also dreams in a very complicated code that he explained to us. This is just one of the notes that was lying next to his bed. So he dreams of things that represent numbers, and the numbers mean something. And through that, that's how he gets the recipes and messages from his ancestors. But also, these are numbers of horses that race on the track. So this is a little side thing he's got going on there. Anyway, so after hearing his story and spending some time with him, I decided to pop the question. I asked him if he would look at Jörg's leg, which was badly swollen and very stiff at the time. And he looked at it, and he touched it a little bit, and then he sat on his chair for quite a while in silence. And he had this whole array of like bottles and herbs and things next to his chair, and he grabbed the bottle here and there, and he drank some like strange liquid mixed with herbs and things. And I kept thinking, like, I hope he doesn't make Jörg drink one of these things, because I just asked him to treat his leg, and if he makes him drink one of these things, Jörg's going to be very pissed off with me. But luckily he didn't. He drank some of it himself and like splashed some on his face, and after sitting quietly for a while, he reached in amongst some of the herbs, and he pulled out a tub of arnica. And he treated Jörg's leg with arnica. So I think if a witch doctor gives you arnica, it's probably good stuff, So yeah, that's what I've been working on over the last couple of years, and I'm working on at the moment. Thanks for listening to my talk. And I wouldn't have been able to tell any of these stories if it wasn't for sometimes taking the back road that's referred to in the title of my talk. So thank you very much. Questions?
How do you find
How do I fund my trips? It's a tough question. It's obviously difficult working on a book. I mean, doing the trip is one aspect that you have to pay for, but obviously if you want to publish a book, you have to spend literally hundreds of thousands of rands to produce that book. And once you paid all that money to the printer, then you receive your shipment of books, and then each book that you sell, like, gives you a little bit of money in your bank account. So it's really difficult. What Nick and I did recently for Bicycle Portraits is we used a social network crowdfunding site called Kickstarter. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's a really amazing platform. Basically, how it works is you put up your idea or concept. It can be anything from a book to a movie to opening a donut shop or whatever. You can put your idea up there, and people can pledge money for some kind of reward. So we use it basically as a pre-sales model. We produce some of the material at our own cost, and then we put up the project on there, and it kind of took off from there. People started pre-ordering the book, at a special price, and sometimes with benefits depending on the amount you pledge. So that's a model of funding books and paying for these trips that I'm really interested in at the moment, and we will be doing that with African Remedy as well. But with the older books, it's literally a question of making debt, which is obviously very risky. But most of the trips at that time, we just paid for ourselves. That's why producing African Salad took 2 years, because we just did it whenever we had some free time and money.
Are you self-published, so no formal publisher involved? And also just very, I followed Kickstarter for a long time. It's quite interesting to see a South African project succeeding on Kickstarter.
I am my own publisher. I've got a small publishing company called Day One Publishing. My first book, The Caution Horses that you guys saw in the beginning, that was published by someone else. But I quickly realized that if you want to make it as a small independent and want to be able to live from making books, I think you have to self-publish. So that's why we started that company. And oh, sorry, I was supposed to repeat the question. Am I my own publisher, self-published? Yes. And Kickstarter. How did a South African get onto Kickstarter, and how did we manage to succeed funding a project on there? Kickstarter is actually only open to US citizens, but we were lucky enough to have a friend there that assisted us with some of the technical stuff that we need, like social security numbers and that kind of thing. So the money was luckily, that's a good point. I was just joking about that. We got permission from Kickstarter to do it that way. We contacted them and said, we're 2 South Africans, we have this project, we really want to do it, but you have to be a US citizen. And they said, well, if you can find someone in the States that can help you, someone you can trust, that can receive the money on your behalf, we can send it to you. Or they can send it to you. And that's what we did. In terms of having the project succeed on Kickstarter, I don't think it matters where you are in the world, but it takes a lot of time and effort to promote the project online. Nick and I spent literally countless hours and sending thousands of emails to blogs and influential people on the internet and people related to cycling for Bicycle Portraits. And it was a lot of hard work to actually make those goals. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Anything else?
What I'm interested in is just at a personal level, that gap between when you have an idea of nature and when that thing actually starts making money, that sort of fuzzy period between. How do you deal with that just at a personal level? I mean, there's a mountain of uncertainty sitting in front of you.
Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, for me, the reward in doing these projects is doing the project, meeting the people, doing the trip. I mean, producing the book is fun, but once the book is then made, then all the money's been spent, then you're now going to sell this book, which is something I'm really bad at. So that makes it hard. You got to stay motivated to sell this product that you've produced, while at the same time you're probably already working on a new idea, a new concept. So that is hard. It's something I struggle with. I don't really have an answer. Shit, I forgot to repeat the question again. Sorry.
Who stocks your books and how do you market it?
We stock our books at most major bookshops like Exclusive Books and, for instance, like independent bookshops like the Book Lounge here in Cape Town. But we obviously have the books available online, which is something we really concentrate on. I forgot again with the question. I'm sorry. Okay. And then we market the books obviously online mostly, especially now through this Kickstarter model that we've been using. We tried something different, because what I did before with books is I kept the idea, the concept of the book totally secret until we released the book. So then no one knows about it. They discover the book, and so we tried something different with Bicycle Portrait, which I found quite interesting, and I think it worked really well. We made all the material available from the day we shot it. So basically, if we shoot like 3 or 4 portraits, like within a week or 2 weeks, those portraits are up online, and you can go to our website, and all 500 people, including the 160 that you see in the book, is on the website. So we saw the website as kind of the center of everything, and then things like the books and launches and prints and other things that are available are just different channels that you can experience the project through. But the online presence of all the images and stories are really important to us.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background before the book? That kind of book project result of get out there?
I was born in 1999, so when I came out the womb, I studied. No, I'm joking. I studied photography here in Woodstock, actually, at Ruth Price, just around the corner here. And I got into teaching immediately after finishing studying. Actually, I was teaching part-time while I was studying. So I did that for, I think, a year or 2, I can't even remember. And I just suddenly felt this is not what I should be doing with my life. You know, I want to travel and do things, and now I'm stuck in a teaching job. And that's what made that's the thing that forced me to get out. And you know, I totally by accident discovered those horses, and I didn't know I was going to stay there. I didn't plan to work on a big project. I sure as hell wasn't planning to publish a book from it. But I've always loved books. I've always collected books. Always read a lot. And I think when those two things came together, when I had the opportunity to publish that book, it kind of became clear to me that this is what I want to do. You know, I love the idea of a book that, you know, it'll still be around when I'm dead, as opposed to an exhibition that maybe 100 or 50 or 150 people see. A book is something that will like last much longer, and people can experience it and hand it down. It's something that's really like a romantic idea that I'm into. I actually really always loved the thought of maybe like 150 years from now, someone pulling out one of my books from the shelf in a second-hand bookshop and go like, "Geez, look at this thing," you know. I think that's a really nice thought, and I think that's what maybe drives me to make books.